They left a Doberman, mother and her puppies to die.
Whoa, hey there.
What happened next changed everything. I've seen terrible things in my life, but nothing like that morning. Santa Rosa Creek Trail. The kind of place where people walk their dogs, where children's laughter drifts under oak trees. The sun was golden, the breeze cool. Everything looked too peaceful, like the world was faking it. I was about to turn back when I heard a long, strangled howl, the sound of metal breaking inside a throat. The cry of something dying. I ran toward it through wet grass until I reached a moss-stained brick wall. And then I froze. A female Doberman, or what was left of one, stood guard over a crumpled cardboard box. Her skin was almost gone, eaten by patches of raw, infected sores that oozed yellow. Each breath sounded like a knife twisting in her chest. Her eyes were sunken wet, filled with both terror and pain. Inside the box, 2 tiny puppies no bigger than my fists wheezed for air. One trembled so hard it couldn't open its eyes. The other scratched at the air searching for milk that wasn't there. My throat closed. A woman pushed her bicycle past, covering her nose. "Disgusting," she muttered. A young man looked over his shoulder. "Don't touch it, you'll catch something." Then they kept walking. I looked around, no one stopped. Only me and her, a skeletal mother Doberman trembling, still shielding her newborns. The sky was blue flawless, pretending innocence. And beneath that oak there was hell. My heart tightened until it hurt. 3 years had passed since my wife died of cancer. A year later, Max, our loyal Doberman, died in my arms. That night, I swore I'd never love another animal again. I couldn't survive losing another soul I called family. But when I saw that mother standing there shaking yet refusing to move away from her pups, I knew I couldn't walk past. I moved slowly, crouched down. "Hey, girl," I whispered. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." She looked at me, and that look burned through me. Not from fear, from shame. In those eyes were pain, despair, and something humans lost a long time ago, loyalty. I opened my backpack and poured some water into my palm. She stared, her throat twitching, then licked once, small, cautious. Then something broke inside me. She turned her head and nudged my hand toward the box as if to say, "Give it to them first." The world went silent. Amid the stench of blood and rot, something achingly beautiful flickered a mother's love. I couldn't hold it anymore. "No one's leaving you behind," I rasped. I pulled off my denim jacket, laid it on the grass, and gently placed the 2 pups onto it. As I bent down, the smell hit me. Metal, pus, and the scent of something halfway between life and death. I wanted to gag, but I didn't look away. The mother panted, lips trembling. I held out my other hand, low, steady. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," I said. She hesitated. Then one step. Another. Her body collapsed halfway, yet she still dragged herself forward to reach her pups. I lifted all 3 into my truck. Blood soaked through my shirt, warm and heavy. That smell, I knew I'd never forget it. As I drove, I saw in the rearview mirror the mother lying on her side, eyes open, head resting against her babies. Each time I hit a bump, she flinched, terrified they might hurt. Something cracked open inside my chest. I had lost my wife, lost Max, lost faith, but I couldn't lose my humanity. So I whispered, half promise, half prayer. "As long as you're breathing, I won't let you die." Not this time. I pressed the gas, speeding toward Redwood Rescue Haven. Behind me, sunlight spilled through the back window, glinting over 3 blood-stained bodies. A beautiful scene, cruelly, unbearably beautiful. I don't remember how many miles it was from the park to the rescue center. All I remember is the wheezing behind me, the faint scratching of 2 tiny pups inside my jacket, and the smell of blood mixed with old disinfectant clinging to the steering wheel. Every time the truck hit a bump, the mother Ruby let out a low whimper as if begging me to slow down. I didn't know how to tell her that I was already doing everything I could. I had sat in this same seat once before, same road, same gray morning, but that time I was driving my wife to the hospital for the last time. I still remember how she gripped my hand, eyes closed, lips moving around words I couldn't hear through the sound of rain slamming against the windshield. 2 weeks later, Max, our old Doberman, stopped eating and slipped quietly away in his sleep. I buried him in the backyard beside the lavender she had planted. After that, the house was nothing but a clock ticking and the wind whispering through the windows. People say time heals all wounds. They never say that. Sometimes it only teaches you how to live with the pain. In the rearview mirror, Ruby lay on her side, her head resting against her pups. Her body was so thin that every breath lifted her ribs like a curtain fluttering in the wind. But those eyes still burned, not the look of something dying, but of a mother standing guard. When the truck turned onto the dirt road to Redwood Rescue Haven, the old wooden sign flickered red in the morning light. A young volunteer came running out, still holding a cup of coffee. When she saw Ruby, she froze. Oh my God, what happened to her? She was abandoned, I said quietly. Mange, neglect, forgotten. The girl said nothing, she just nodded. We carried Ruby into the emergency room. I held the 2 pups light as breath, fragile as paper. The male dark red-black gasped in short bursts you could only hear if your ear were pressed close. The smaller one, pink-skinned, whimpered softly each time I touched her. Dr. Collins, the vet, approached, voice rough. Severe malnutrition, advanced skin infection. Another few hours, and I know I cut in. He looked at me, then at Ruby, trembling on the steel table. Is she yours? I shook my head. No, but no one's ever abandoning her again. He didn't answer. He just motioned for me to hold her head steady while he set up the IV. When the needle pierced her cracked skin, Ruby hissed softly but didn't resist. I kept my hand on her neck, feeling the weak warmth pulsing beneath that ruined coat. The 2 pups were now tucked into a warming box, their tiny heads pressed together like 2 beans from the same pod. And for the first time in years, I heard the sound of my own sob. Not loud, just real enough that I turned my face away. The room was too white, too bright. The IV clicked with a slow, steady rhythm. I knew that sound. It was the same one I heard in the hospital the night my wife slipped away. Doctor, Collins said quietly, if they make it through the night, their chances improve. I'll stay, I replied. He started to speak, then sighed instead. I pulled up a chair beside the table, my back against the wall. Ruby lay still, her eyes locked on the heating box. Each time one of the pups whimpered, she flinched. Her body was too weak to move, but instinct still rose from somewhere deeper than flesh, the instinct of a mother refusing to die until she knew her children were safe. I watched her for a long time, and in that silence I recognized something I'd forgotten. Faith. Ruby didn't speak. She didn't need to. Just by lying there, she told me something no sermon ever could love, that asks for nothing is the only kind that lasts. I whispered, you remind me of her, you know. Strong until the very end, even when there's nothing left to hold on to. The dim light reflected off the steel floor and my tears dropped beside Ruby's paw. I didn't hide them. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. Because in that moment I knew silence was no longer my refuge. Ruby breathed softly, her chest trembling like a thread in the wind. I placed my hand on her head, feeling that fragile heartbeat still there. Hold on, I said, voice breaking. I'm here. I'm staying right here. Outside, the wind moved through the tall pines, moaning like an old memory. Inside that room filled with the scent of blood and antiseptic, 3 small lives fought to keep breathing. And I, a man who had been dead inside for far too long, felt my heart start to beat again. The first morning after that long night at Redwood Rescue Haven began with a dim light filtering through a fogged window. I was still there, back against the wall, head resting on my knees, eyes too heavy to close. The air reeked of antiseptic old blood and burned skin. The IV machine dripped steadily like a clock, reminding me that 3 fragile lives were still clinging on, at least for now. Ruby lay on an old blanket, her body wrapped in white bandages stained yellow and red. Last night, Collins told me she might not make it to the morning. I didn't answer. I just sat there holding her bony paw cold as iron. I had held my wife's hand the same way once, praying for something I knew I couldn't keep. When the first sliver of light touched the edge of the bed, Ruby stirred. A dry, raspy breath crawled from her throat. I lifted my head. Her eyes opened, clouded, dull, but aware. Almost instantly, she tried to rise. Her body shook back, legs slipping on the steel floor, the IV line stretching taut. I stepped forward to steady her, but she growled a weak, warning sound that still carried fire. I froze, palms up. "Easy, girl. I'm not here to hurt you," I said, my voice rough as sandpaper. She scanned the room, then turned toward the warming box where her pups slept. Ash twitched, Juniper wheezed a tiny sound fragile as a cricket. Ruby stiffened, her breath quickened. I saw her legs tremble, yet she dragged herself forward anyway, the IV dripping behind her, leaving small wet spots on the floor. I moved the chair aside to clear her path. She didn't look at me again. Her whole world was inside that box. When she reached it, she lowered her head and touched each tiny body with her nose, inhaling deeply. Her eyes closed. I saw a tear slide down the bridge of her muzzle, landing on the bandage wrapped around her chest. Her breathing hitched, rough and heavy, but it wasn't pain. It was released. Collins stepped into the room, about to speak. I raised a hand. "Don't," I whispered. "Let her be a mother." He nodded and backed out quietly. Watching her broke something open inside me, a creature so broken, standing at the edge of death, and still her only thought was for her children. Her body was failing, but her heart kept working. After a while, she turned to me. Her gaze had changed. No longer guarded testing, I understood. I moved closer slowly, sitting beside the warming box but keeping my distance. "I'm not taking them away," I murmured. Ruby looked from me to her pups. Morning light caught her eyes, turning them into small pools of gold, faint but alive. I opened my palm, showing a bit of soft food Collins had left. She glanced at it, then looked away. I set the bowl down and nudged it gently toward her. The pups stirred. Ash sniffed, then began to lick greedily. Ruby tilted her head, watching them, then turned to me. In that moment, there was no line between human and animal. Only the shared fear of losing what we love. "You did good, Ruby," I whispered. "You kept them alive long enough to be saved." She lowered her head, not understanding my words, but I knew she felt the tone. I raised my hand, slow, low, non-threatening. Ruby watched, hesitated, ears flattening, and then, to my disbelief, she inched forward and pressed her head into my palm. Just for a second. A fragile touch, light as smoke, but it hit my chest like a thunderclap. I didn't know which of us was trembling more, but in that single heartbeat I realized she had chosen to trust. A small, fragile kind of trust, but real. In that antiseptic-scented room, under the steady drip of the IV, something came back to life. Not just in her, but in me. She pulled away and turned back to her pups. I stayed still, barely breathing, afraid that even the sound of air might break the spell. Outside, the light grew stronger. Birds sang on the roof. A new day had begun. Collins returned, watching quietly before saying, "You see that? She's not giving up." I nodded, eyes fixed on Ruby. "Yeah," I said, voice rough. "And neither am I. I thought Ruby was past the worst of it. But 2 days later, the fever came back hotter, crueler than before. That afternoon in Santa Rosa was thick with damp air sunlight spilling through the glass and laying gold over Ruby's flushed skin. Her breathing wasn't breathing anymore. It was the rasp of dry wood being sawed apart, harsh and uneven. Her body twitched, her eyes dull and unfocused, a line of bloody drool slipping down to the floor. Collins took her temperature, his voice dropping low. 104. Not good. My throat tightened. "What can we do? Antibiotics aren't working," he said. "I'll try a stronger dose, but if she doesn't respond in 4 hours, I don't think she'll make it." I looked at Ruby, my mouth dry as ash. The 2 pups were still in the incubator, sleeping softly, stirring once in a while. They had no idea their mother was fighting minute by minute just to stay alive. I stepped closer, laid my hand on her neck. Her skin burned under my palm, her heartbeat weak but steady. She lifted her head slightly, eyes flicking toward the box. That look, it wasn't pleading. It was command. "Don't let them die." I swallowed hard, turned to Collins. "Get everything ready. I'm staying." We cleaned her wounds, changed the dressings. When I peeled back the gauze, the stench hit blood pus and burned flesh. I fought the urge to gag. My hands shook, but didn't stop. Collins' voice floated somewhere far away. "She's losing more blood than I thought. Evan, you holding up?" I didn't answer. I just met Ruby's eyes locked on mine. And I swore if she died here it wouldn't be for nothing. I remembered the night my wife left me the same smell iron and alcohol. I had stood there helpless while the person I loved slipped away. But not this time. This time I could fight. Collins drew the syringe, injected the new drug. Ruby whimpered, her body jerking. I held her leg and whispered, "Ruby, listen to me. You don't quit now. Those babies need you. I need you too." I don't know if she heard, but right after I said it, she exhaled sharply as if forcing the sickness out of her chest. The next 4 hours were hell. I sat by her bed counting the beats on the monitor. At times the line dipped almost flat. I thought she was gone. I almost dropped my head in defeat when Collins whispered, "Look." Ruby's muscles twitched. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. A faded pupil searched the room, alive again. I pointed toward the box. "They're right there, Ruby. Both are still breathing." She turned her head. When she saw them, her breathing slowed, steadied. My lips trembled, not from fear, but from relief, so deep it hurt. Collins exhaled. "There's nothing in medicine that explains this. She's alive by sheer will." I rasped, "No, she's alive because of love." Outside, rain began to fall. The sound of it hitting the metal roof mixed with the drip of the IV, forming a slow, steady rhythm. I took a towel, gently wiped Ruby's face. Her eyelids drooped heavy with exhaustion, but I knew she wasn't done fighting. By nightfall, I was alone in the room. The faint yellow light glowed over the incubator. Ash and Juniper stirred, crawling toward the edge, eyes barely open. I lifted them and laid them beside Ruby. She stirred, lips parting, head tilting towards them. Even half-dead instinct pulled her back to motherhood. The pups pressed close, finding warmth against her chest, burrowing into the white bandages. Ruby inhaled, then went still. I panicked until my hand felt it, a heartbeat weak but steady. I bent low, whispering, "Good girl. Hold that rhythm." In that moment, there were only 3 breaths in the room, one heavy, 2 soft as mist. And I, a man who had already buried everything he loved, found myself praying for the first time in years. "Please," I whispered, "don't take her, not again." Thunder rolled somewhere far away, but I heard something else, the faintest snort from Ruby. She licked one pup's forehead, then rested her head between them. Her breathing blended with the sound of rain, fragile but even. I sat there until morning eyes, burning heart quietly alight. In that world of blood, mud, and pain, something had begun to live again, not just in her, but in me. 3 days passed after that brutal fever. 3 days in which I barely left the small room at Redwood Rescue Haven. Ruby was still weak. She lay motionless on a gray blanket, her front legs wrapped in white gauze, her body mapped with scars. But unlike that night, her breathing was steadier now, warmer. The room no longer held only the rhythm of the IV drip. There was another sound, the soft whimper of 2 tiny lives learning how to live. Every morning, as the first light slipped through the fogged window, I'd see Ruby open her eyes. No more panic, just exhaustion. And the first thing she always was turn her head toward her pups. If Ash or Juniper whimpered, she'd lift her head, nudge them gently with her nose, then rest again. Collins said, "She's recovering faster than expected. Could be the meds." I gave a faint smile. "No, it's the heart." He looked at me, didn't argue. That day, I cleaned the bowls and prepared a small meal for Ruby. When I set it down, she looked at it, then at her pups. Ash was learning to walk, tiny legs trembling. Falling again and again, still crawling toward her. Juniper stumbled behind. Ruby licked their heads softly before lowering her own to eat. The sight of it tightened my throat. She wasn't eating out of hunger. She was eating because her children needed her alive. I pulled a chair closer, sat down. "You know, Ruby," I said quietly, "I thought I understood loss. But maybe I never really did until I met you." Ruby lifted her head, eyes calm and deep. No bark, no movement. Just that look, sorrowful but steady. I told her everything as if she could understand each word about my wife, about Max, about the empty house at the end of Elm Street. I told her about nights filled only with the ticking of a clock and the chill slipping through the window. I told her I once thought kindness in me had died. Ruby listened, or seemed to. Her ears lowered slightly, head tilted as if hearing the weight behind my voice. And then she did something I didn't expect. She pushed herself up, wobbled forward, and rested her head on my knee. I froze. Just one touch, but I heard my own heartbeat echo in my ears. She trembled, but didn't pull away. I placed my hand on her head. Her skin was rough, warm, still smelling faintly of antiseptic, but underneath it pulsed the unmistakable rhythm of life. "Thank you, Ruby," I whispered. No one had leaned on me in years. No one had touched me like that. That small gesture melted everything inside me, the loneliness, the anger, the hollow nights that used to swallow me whole. Collins came in, saw us, stopped for a second, then quietly turned and walked out. He understood. Some moments don't need words. That night, I rearranged the corner of the room, laid a blanket beside Ruby's bed. I slept on the floor, surrounded by the breathing of 3 fragile souls. Every so often, Ruby twitched in her sleep. Each time she did, I reached out, touched her lightly, and she settled again. That night, I dreamed not of hospitals or farewells, but of light. Light glinting off Ruby's glossy black coat, the sound of Ash's tiny bark and Juniper rolling in the sun. I dreamed of laughter, the sound I thought I'd forgotten. When I woke, Ruby was still there, eyes closed, her pups curled into her chest. I said nothing, just watched. In that simple, ordinary scene, I saw something vast, life quietly continuing. Collins came in to check her, nodded. At this rate, she might be standing in a few days. I looked at Ruby, smiled. She will. Standing's the only thing she knows how to do. By noon, the Santa Rosa sunlight filled the room, reflecting in Ruby's eyes 2 amber sparks glowing like embers. She looked at me. No fear now, just something that felt a lot like faith. I leaned in, whispering, "You did good, Ruby. In this broken world, you still chose love." Ruby exhaled, her ears flicked, and Ash and Juniper squeaked softly. I lifted them, set them on her lap, and for the first time in years I laughed. Not the kind that hides pain. A real one. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Sunlight shimmered across the tin roof like the breath of dawn, and I, who once thought my heart was long dead, felt it beat again. Gently, slowly, but real. That night, the skies over Santa Rosa broke open with a cold, relentless rain. The kind that drowned the whole city in mist, heavy and slow, like the weary breathing of someone too tired to go on. Redwood Haven was silent. Only the pounding of rain on the tin roof and the wind sweeping through the pines behind the shelter filled the air. I sat in that familiar room listening to the slow drip of the IV, the dim yellow light casting soft shadows over Ruby's frail body. She was sleeping, or at least I thought she was until I heard a rough, broken gasp, and her breathing stopped halfway. "Ruby," I whispered, no response. I shot to my feet. Her chest rose unevenly, each breath jagged, collapsing into silence. Her whole body began to twitch. I shouted for Colin's hands shaking as I grabbed the IV line. Lightning split the sky, flooding the room with white. "No, not now," I muttered, heart-hammering. Collins burst, an emergency bag in hand. Her heart rates dropping. "Hold her head steady." I dropped to my knees, cradling Ruby's neck, feeling the faint pulse fluttering beneath fever-hot skin. Collins injected something fast into her vein. His voice sharp, controlled. "Systemic infection. We push the meds now." I looked down at her, powerless but whispering. "Anyway, over and over, Ruby, hear me. Don't leave me. Don't leave them. You've come too far for this." Ash and Juniper stirred at the noise, their tiny cries piercing through the damp air. I turned, heart twisting. They didn't understand what was happening, only that their mother was suddenly too still. Ruby flinched, as if she'd heard them. She tried to lift her head, but managed only a few inches before collapsing again. Her eyes flickered open, cloudy and scared. I knew she wasn't fighting death out of fear. She was fighting because she couldn't stand to leave her babies. I caught Colin's arm. "Let me." He hesitated, then stepped back, his face lined with understanding. I leaned close, pressing my forehead against hers. The smell of medicine blood and damp bandages filled the space between us. My voice broke as I spoke. "Listen, girl. I once watched the woman I loved stop breathing and I couldn't do a damn thing. But tonight is different. I'm here. I won't let you go." Ruby trembled. A drop of water from my hair fell onto her nose. I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. She opened her eyes, met mine, and exhaled a fragile, trembling breath, but longer than before. Collins glanced at the monitor. Her heart rates rising, I stayed there, forehead pressed to hers, whispering prayers I hadn't believed in for years. She jerked once, then drew a deep breath. Her chest lifted, fell, lifted again. I let myself sink to the floor, weak with relief. Collins exhaled hard. We made it. I looked up. The light reflected in Ruby's eyes, tired, blurred, but alive. Ash and Juniper crawled out from their blankets, stumbling, bumping into their mother's legs. Ruby tilted her head, licked the top of each tiny skull. Slow trembling, but purely instinctive, I laughed through tears. "You just taught me what faith looks like, girl." Collins placed a hand on my shoulder. "Evan, you should rest." I shook my head. "I'll stay. It's cold out there. There's still warmth here." He didn't argue. He just left us alone, the man and the 3 small lives clinging to each other. The room filled with rain and breathing. I pulled a blanket over Ruby and sat on the floor, back to the wall. The light flickered soft and hazy like memory. Ruby turned her head, her amber eyes finding me. She didn't bark or whine, she just looked. And in that look I heard what she couldn't say. "I trust you," I nodded. "Yeah," I whispered. "I trust you too." Outside, the thunder faded. The rain softened to a hush. I brushed my fingers against her forehead, warm now, not fever-hot. Ruby closed her eyes, breathing evenly. I stayed there until dawn. The first light slipped through the glass, touching Ruby and her two pups curled against her chest. Everything was so still, so peaceful, I was afraid to breathe too loudly and break it. I looked at them, then at my hands, the same hands that once held the dying, now touching the living. And I understood sometimes you have to lose everything before you learn how to hold on to something small like a single steady breath. It had been almost 2 months since that stormy night. Santa Rosa had slipped into a gentle summer, and the sky was so blue now it was hard to believe I had once prayed beneath a storm. Redwood Haven was calm again. The trees behind the shelter were sprouting fresh leaves, their resin scent carried on the cool morning wind. Every day, when I opened the door, Ruby was there, no more trembling, no more bandages. Her legs were steady now, her eyes bright, and her black and tan coat shimmered in the light like silk. The pups, Ash and Juniper, had learned to run, to chew on my boots, to splash in the water bowl. Every time I called, the 3 of them came barreling toward me like small gusts of wind. I often joked with Collins that if anything could make a man young again, it had to be those wagging tails. Ruby no longer feared footsteps. The day I unbuckled the last strap from her neck, she just stood still, head tilted as if she couldn't quite believe it. Then she stepped forward and brushed her head against my leg, soft, warm, peaceful. That morning, sunlight streamed through the window, spreading across the floor and the curve of her back. I watched her standing there and saw something I hadn't seen since my wife died, the true light of life. I decided to bring them home. Not back to the shelter. Not to another temporary roof. Home, the small house at the end of Elm Street, the one that had known only wind and memories. When I opened the door, the smell of old wood and dried lavender drifted out, carrying with it the ghosts I'd buried long ago. Ruby stepped in slowly, sniffing every corner. She stopped at the garden where I had buried Max, my first Doberman. She sat down silent, lowering her head. I joined her, saying nothing. Just 2 beings who had lost everything, sharing a silence that didn't need words. Ash and Juniper darted across the yard, chasing each other through the sun. I watched them, then turned to Ruby. She was watching too, her amber eyes alight, the look of a mother who'd just found her world again. That evening, I brewed coffee while Ruby lay on the porch, the pups curled against her chest. The wind whispered through the trees. Moonlight glowed across the steps, and in that rhythm of breath and soft paw scrapes I realized this house was alive again. I spoke quietly. "You know, girl, I thought I was the one who saved you. But the truth is, you saved me from myself." Ruby opened her eyes and glanced at me. That glance was all the thanks I needed. Under the moonlight, she stood, walked over, and rested her head on my knee, just like the first time. Only now, there was no fear, only trust. I smiled. "Yeah, I get it. You're saying we're okay now, aren't you?" She sighed softly. Ash yipped, and Juniper pressed against her leg. The 3 of them curled together, a small flicker of warmth in the quiet night. I sat still, afraid even to breathe, not wanting to disturb something so perfect. By dawn, mist draped the lavender garden. Ruby stretched on the porch legs, firm tail wagging gently. The pups trotted after her, hopping through patches of light. I stood in the doorway watching and felt my heart soften. I never thought I'd want to live again, really live. But because of Ruby, I understood that kindness can bloom even in ashes. Saving a life isn't just giving breath back to them, it's learning how to believe in goodness again. I turned toward my wife's photo on the table. She was smiling in the frame, her eyes tender, as if she'd known all along. I whispered, "You see that, Laura?" The house has footsteps again. A breeze passed through, nudging the picture frame, its reflection glinting across Ruby's face in the yard. I took it as an answer. I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath. For the first time in years, it wasn't heavy. It was light, as if shared with the 3 small lives growing in the sunlight outside. If you still believe there's a place for kindness in this world, share this story. Not for me, not for Ruby, but for the small souls still waiting for someone to stop. Every view, every share, it could be the first breath of another miracle. Because sometimes the ones we rescue are the ones who rescue us right back.